Welcome to the Take Up Space Summit. This is a gathering of amazing women leaders who embody the principles of feminine wisdom. We're living in a time when the old ways of dominance just don't cut it anymore. It's time for us to step up and lead with empathy, collaboration, and mutual support. This event is designed to inspire women from all over the world to take up space, to resist and challenge systems that seek to silence or erase our voices, and to do it all with grace and ease. This is your opportunity to honor your power as a woman and to unapologetically elevate every aspect of your life, from your relationships to your career, and to do so with ease and pleasure. So let's celebrate and prioritize the sacred feminine in us and create a beautiful space where we can all thrive together. I'm your host for this event, Irene Chong, and today I'm excited to present Mary Reynolds Thompson, who'll be sharing more on how earth-based archetypes hold the key to rewilding the feminine. Mary Reynolds Thompson, founder of Live Your Wild Soul Story, is a facilitator of poetry and journal therapy and a pioneer in the emerging field of spiritual ecology, speaking and teaching around the world on the importance of connecting to our inner wild landscapes. Mary also serves as core faculty for the Therapeutic Writing Institute, the leading training institute for expressive writing therapy, and is a tutor for the Ecotherapy Tariki Trust. Her book, Reclaiming the Wild Soul, How Earth's Landscapes Restore Us to Wholeness, was a 2015 Nautilus Award winner. A Wild Soul Woman, 5 Earth Archetypes to Unleash Your Full Feminine Power, releases spring of 2024 by Findhorn Press. Mary can be reached at her website, maryreynoldsthompson.com, and that link to that can be found on this summit page as well. So welcome, Mary. I'm excited to feature you on this summit because your writing and your work on helping women connect to their inner wild landscapes is truly amazing. And since so much of what you do rests on the idea of story and writing therapy, I'd like to start our time together by inviting you to share your story. And I'm going to ask you a question that I ask every speaker. And my question is this: what was the greatest challenge in your life when it came to taking up space, especially with regards to expressing and living the truth of your wild feminine? And how did you overcome this?
Irene, thank you. Thank you for having me here. And thank you for that great question. So I was always a wild child. And I grew up in England where over-expressiveness wasn't exactly valued. And so there was this sense from the time I was very young that I should sort of tamp it down a little. I should just keep it in more, that I was too out there. And so I, like many women, I really sort of took that in. But there was this deep desire in me to be that wild, expressive creature that I felt myself to be. And when I hit my teenage years, I discovered alcohol. And from the age of about 16 to 27, I drank alcoholically. I mean, I literally was an alcoholic almost the moment I took a first drink. It was just in my bones. It's in my family tree. Me and alcohol don't mix. But the thing about alcohol was, for a while, it freed me. It freed me from that self-consciousness, from those inner voices that told me I was too much, and yet not enough. You know, that awful paradoxical feeling. I didn't give a hoot. You know, when I was drunk, I was out there. But then, as so many what I call the shadow wild behaviors, where we move into addiction to try and break free and take up space, as you talk about, they can work for a while and then they don't work. And for me, at the age of 27, they really stopped working. Alcohol had gone from friend to torturer. And I was living in the smallest, darkest space imaginable. And then, thank God, or goddess, or whatever you call it, but this moment of grace landed, and I just knew I was an alcoholic and I had to do something about it. And at that time, I had moved from London to New York, and then I was in San Francisco. And the natural beauty of this Bay Area created this tension in me, of the darkness and smallness inside with this exquisite natural beauty outside. And I started to feel myself further and further drawn into spending time in nature. And it was literally in that first week of sobriety where I was shaking, sweating, detoxing, and I was walking on a stormy day on the bluffs above the Pacific Ocean. And I had this moment, and this is my moment about taking up space, the challenge. And I was just in turmoil inside, thinking, how am I going to live without drinking? I just didn't know. I didn't know how to do that. And I was looking at this ocean and I was thinking, gosh, it's all churned up and roiling the way I was inside. But then I had this moment and I went, yes, it's in turmoil, but it's also really, really strong. And I felt salt in my mouth, and I didn't know if it was from my tears or from the ocean spray. And this thought came to me, yes, you are absolutely churning right now, but you are really strong too. And I knew in that moment that I could stay sober. I knew it, and I have for almost 40 years now. So it was this moment of feeling the immensity of the ocean as a part of me. So not small, not shamed, not locked in, but as immense as the ocean.
Wow, that was such a beautiful story, Mary, and you told it so well. First off, thank you for sharing so powerfully and vulnerably. You were talking about the struggles that you had when growing up, being told that you were too much and yet not enough, that paradoxical struggle that we all have as we try to fit in and belong and find a place for ourselves. And it sounds like you really went on quite a journey geographically and also, in your inner landscape. And what I keep hearing as well, because, you keep talking about this idea of the wild feminine, I think about the opposite of that, which is the domesticated, the tamed parts of ourselves that have been conditioned and programmed to toe the line, to cut out parts of us that, are not deemed as acceptable. And then how we each in our own way try to find coping mechanisms. Television can be hugely addicting. And I think that was my escape. I escaped by watching a lot of movies and reading a lot of books. In some way, as you say, right? Like at some point it did help until it didn't, until we realized that it was a form of escapism. So it sounds like, you being out in nature was enormously healing. When you're talking about the exquisite beauty of nature, what I sense is that you were really seeing a reflection of the beauty that you had inside yourself, that untethered, free and wild soul that is a part of nature, that does not deserve to be shamed or belittled or put down. And because you saw the strength in that, you were able to take on that reflection and discover it in yourself. So I see so much of the medicine that you're bringing forth now stemmed from your own personal deep journey into these wild nature archetypes. So on that note, could you share with us, what are these earth archetypes that you talk and share so much about? Give us a little introduction and let's go through what each of these archetypes are, so that the audience, as they're listening to this, can also start asking themselves, I wonder which archetype I resonate most with.
Yes, yes. So I really want to say a little bit about what an archetype is, though, if I may, because it's we do understand them, but maybe just a tiny bit about them. Is where many of us are familiar with the classic archetypes, of the Greek and the Roman gods, and also of these other archetypes like the warrior and the trickster and the victim and the orphan. And so if I say those words to you, you will recognize, oh yeah, I'm sometimes the trickster. Oh yeah, sometimes I'm the victim. I'm the poor me, poor me. We're all made and comprised of these rich, rich archetypes. But when I began to study poetry therapy in the early 2000s, which was really this big shift in career, I discovered the nature poets. And what really fascinated me about them was this dance they did between what we consider to be inner and outer nature, but is really just one nature. But their eyes would be on the world outside, but they would always return us to the inner terrain. And as I began to work with them, I began to be drawn to 5 specific archetypes: desert, forest, ocean and river, mountain, talk about taking up space, mountain, and grasslands. And I began to do a lot of workshops around them, and then to write the book you mentioned, Reclaiming the Wild Soul. But in 2016, I was asked to teach a course on these archetypes through an eco-fem organization called Tree Sisters. And a question came to me, which is, well, women have always had this particular relationship with nature. I mean, our rhythms, our moon cycles, the fact that our bellies swell with ancient seas of amniotic fluid, milk pours from our breasts. We are so attuned. We create birth. We birth out of our own bellies, even if you haven't had children or do not plan to have children. That is still part of your feminine power. And so, but I thought, well, what about the archetypes? What about these great landscapes? And as I began to work with them, they began to emerge not as desert, but as the embodied feminine energy of desert woman, as the embodied feminine energy of forest woman, as this ocean woman, and also on a sort of rebirthing journey. So you have the barren worlds of desert, that open space of beginning, and the dark womb of forest woman, this place of incubation and gestation and exploration, and the breaking waters, when your passion runs so strong that something, life breaks through, to giving birth, to manifesting as mountain woman, to nurturing what has been newly born in you back in community as grassland woman. So these archetypes began to really lay out the most feminine of rewilding journeys, which is a journey of transformation and rebirth. And everything was so interesting. It came down to this core essence that I think you have touched on so beautifully, Irene, which is this sense of breaking free of that over domestication, of all the shoulds that we're told, of being dutiful, of always only thinking of others, all of these things. And so it became like the great liberating force of breaking free into a set of ancient archetypes that preceded by many billions of years, the more modern ones we think about, that they are literally innate in us so deeply, wherever we live, whatever our life experience is, whatever we think about anything else, we can access these great earth energies within us to help us inform ourselves outside of a patriarchal structure about what it really means to live rewilded, which is really just saying authentically, in our truest, most authentic way. Did I actually answer your question? I sort of went on a romp.
I mean, it's so poetic, and there were so many pieces that you brought up that maybe I'll just circle back and see and take a little meander and see where this goes. I really loved how you started out by explaining what archetypes is. I see it as there are these universal common threads that women all over the world, the 5 archetypes that you highlighted, even though, and we were talking a little bit about this, right? Like geography or culture could be different, but there are these universal archetypes that stem from Mother Earth, that we're all children of, that we're all a part of. So there's this universal common thread that we can see in how we connect with one another. Because again, I do see the feminine as not separate or individual. There is this communal gathering, right? And really, like, when I see this rise of the sacred feminine, it can't be done alone. It has to be done as a community together, women coming together in circle. So with these archetypes that you highlighted, I'm seeing them really as templates for transformation. It's like, I can imagine a woman who has been feeling trapped and boxed in and wants to step out and break free. But how does she liberate herself? Who does she turn towards for like a role model? These are few and far between in a world that has successfully domesticated not just women, also the men. But if we wanted to look to a model with which we could attain to, so that we can learn to break out of these shackles, who can we turn to? And it's so beautiful that you've turned to nature. And, you were talking about how these are archetypes that are pre-patriarchy. They are primordial. There's something really, primal about these forces inside of us, like that it's a reminder that we are a force of nature. Again, the idea of the feminine, the oppression and the suppression, there have been these judgments about the feminine as weak. I know that I grew up in a culture that taught me that being feminine was being soft and gentle, and we didn't want that. We wanted to be strong and masculine. But what I'm hearing from you is that, my gosh, if you want to look at real power and real strength, take a look at the ocean. Take a look at the mountains, look to nature, and you'll see that. And again, we call it Mother Earth for a reason. There is something very uniquely feminine in its flavor. So, on that note, if a woman was thinking of embarking on this journey of rewilding herself, what can she do? So how can these archetypes help us initiate this journey of transformation?
Yes, and I love this because really, I think it's so true. I just want to comment on your comments, if I may, for a moment, because I think there's what I have sensed in working with women from around the world, and I'm sure you have observed the same, is there's this kind of like there's something that's wanting to come out, and we sense that over domestication, and quite agree that men have been equally wounded by the patriarchy, though in different ways. But it's like we hit against the bars of the cage, and the bars of the cage are made up of this system and these structures that we grew up within. And so that's oftentimes when we're really trying to break free, we spend our whole time fighting and trying to knock down these bars, right? So immediately we're in this sort of oppositional, masculinized, aggressive mode, like, fighting. I remember in the 80s when it was about, feminism and power, and women had shoulder pads out to here. You will have bypassed this, but honestly, we lost our necks. We were all dressed like American footballers with our huge, because we were supposed to literally crack the glass ceiling. So our way of trying to feminize ourselves, which is, I think, what you were saying, was actually completely antithetical to true feminine power. It was all about manning up, right? So when we go to these archetypes, and I think it's really important to realize that we are simply an expression of the earth in human form. So we literally were birthed. We call her Mother Earth because we literally are made of the same stuff, and we emerge from her. We go to a place where we don't have to battle the powers that be, because we've just said, great, your little patriarchy over here, you are incredibly recent you are literally man-made. You actually have very little power when we stop feeding you that power by trying to get into this kind of antagonistic relationship, and we just sweep ourselves off. And we say, oh, as desert woman, I completely get that I can be self-sufficient, that I don't have to take care of everything and everyone, that I don't need to find my own value by just giving and giving endlessly to other people or other causes, that I exist in my own right, and that I have the capacity to be with myself in that great, deep, awesome, meditative silence, and to really feel into the bones of who I am. And that power, I'm not engaging over here. What I'm doing is cultivating the wisdom, the patterns and energies and characteristics of desert that knows how to thrive on so little within myself, And so I've taken that first step of saying there is a me. There is a me that isn't dependent on the approval of other people. And that, I think, is really the beginning of a woman's journey. Her separation, even if you don't physically, all sort of Shiro's journey begins with this sense of separation, that even if you don't physically remove yourself, and many of us are not in a position to remove ourselves from situations that are challenging and difficult, because there are all kinds of things that prevent us, like being able to make a living, all kinds of things, look after our children, care for. But we can find that place within ourselves. We can go in and really listen deeply to ourselves. So for me, that's the beginning. And then in a way, Forest Woman continues that with saying, now that you've said that there is a self, that there is an I that is taking this journey, now go into the deep belly, the intuitive, feral, undomesticated part of you, to really begin to seed and gestate and explore what it is and who you are when you get off that linear patriarchal path and you begin to go into your own imagination. So into your own knowing. So I would say the beginning of a journey for a woman from over domestication to rewilding begins not by taking action outwardly, but by really, really beginning to go inward.
Beautiful. What I'm really getting is that you are speaking to a revolution that is arising where we're no longer pushing back. There's a better way of doing things, and it's the inner cultivation you were talking about. And the feminine is it's yin and it's in, right? It's inward, and it's about first following that path. I love how you spoke to the beginnings of the desert, and then that moves on and it fluidly flows into the forest woman. And I feel that you've just given us a really beautiful introduction to these two archetypes. And I'd like to ask you to continue your share of these archetypes, because there's ocean and river, mountain and grassland. Like, please tell us more.
I'd be delighted to. So in Forest Woman, as I said, we're gestating these seeds of our dreams. But as many of us know, many of the things and the goals that we've accomplished, and many of us are, we've accomplished extraordinary things in our life. Women are amazing. We get stuff done, right? But oftentimes it's not about following our passion. It's not about following the direction of our energy, where we're sort of propelled to go by our souls, right? So oftentimes in life, what we do is we achieve something on the outside that has some resemblance to what we truly want, but isn't what we truly want. And that's because we haven't surrendered to the power of our passion, to our feeling, and to our emotion. We've been logically following a path, but we haven't followed a heart path. So Ocean and River Woman is about breaking down the dams, is allowing yourself to unleash that energetic knowing, your deep emotional life, your passions, to follow that current, to give yourself, to surrender to it. Even more than give yourself permission, literally just surrender to it. Become really aware of what brings you alive. And we know we can't live without water for a minute. We can survive for days without food, but water we need. And we need our passion. We need to feel alive. We need to be motivated by our emotional terrain. And so this is where the waters break. Because in following our energy, obstacles fall down. If we're not living our true purpose and passion, we won't have the energy to overcome the obstacles. So the breaking waters of Ocean and River Woman are about allowing our passions to prepare us to put our visions, our thoughts, our ideas, our voices into the world. And so then we move into giving birth as Mountain Woman. And she's the part of us that is willing to be visible and therefore vulnerable, and to start that organization, to join that local council, to stand up to somebody or something, have that difficult conversation. It doesn't have to be like building a huge organization. That isn't what it's about. It's about saying, I love poetry. I'm going to write a poem. I am going to have the courage to face that blank page, and I'm not going to stand in the shadow anymore. I'm going to write a poem. I am going to do that. I'm willing to be seen. I'm willing to have what's inside of me actually move into the world. It's about an alignment between your bedrock values and how you show up in the world. And the more you stand on those bedrock values, the greater space you can take up, right? It's that, if you haven't done that work of desert and forest and ocean, you're not going to have that. You're going to, we see it often in our culture where people get sort of rocketed to fame and fortune, and they psychologically implode because they haven't developed that deep spine, that deep knowing of who they are. So, and this is a really important one too, because I think a lot of women stand back from their true power because the way power has been modeled in this world is not very attractive to us. We see what power looks like and we go, that's really. So this is the shift from the domination that you talked about earlier, from that domination power over paradigm to power with, that collaborative partnering. You know, we're all chained together on the mountainside because that's how we survive. We do not climb a mountain alone. And then finally, the sort of Shiro's return is always the return to community. And that's often the most challenging part of our journey, because we are so excited by what has been rewilded in us, what has been birthed through us. And we come sort of waving back, going, hey, hey, you know, we're so full of it. And people go, you know, I preferred the small you were less trouble, you were less disruptive. Who are you? I don't want what you have, the sacred medicine you have to offer, you know. And so we have to take this time to constantly protect that rewilded aspect of ourselves as we move back in to the dailiness of life. And, you know, after the ecstasy, the laundry, wrote Jack Cornfield, right? And it's in that willingness to cultivate community, to cultivate soil, to cultivate soul, to say, yeah, at the moment, I am struggling to find the place to offer my gifts, but I'm not giving up. And I know for myself personally, with the work of the Wild Soul, I spent years in the wilderness. I would go to networking events and people say, what do you do? And I would give my little blurb. And I could see them. I called it the donut effect, because their eyes would just glaze over and I could see them looking, where can I go? How can I, you know, kind of escape this mad woman? But I just stayed with it. I just stayed with it. And I would find one or two people who got it, and then more and more people. And then suddenly the world was changing. I had just been a little ahead of the curve. And that's often the case when we rewild ourselves. We women were going to be the pioneers of the rewilded womanhood, right? So we're going to be a little ahead of the curve, but hang in there. And, you know, people will catch up, you know.
I am deeply moved and inspired by the wisdom that you're sharing here, Mary. You know, not only did you just take us through a journey through all this inner terrain, and I believe that, you know, the women who are watching this, they're thinking about different stages in their lives when they can resonate with each of these. And I know that I certainly could, like memories were surfacing. I knew that there were moments when I felt like I was drowning in my emotions and I didn't know, and I was looking for land, you know, because I didn't know how to make sense of the overwhelm. And there were also moments when I would see the summit ahead of me and think it was too daunting to scale. And in fact, you know, as I was preparing for this summit and I was launching and all of that, I chose the word summit very deliberately, and it was what landed for me, because in a lot of ways it felt like I was trying to scale this mountain to get to the peak. And it's been tough, but it's just like, yeah, putting one step in front of the other, like one foot in front, and just keeping going, because I think, you know, exactly as you say, it's so important before we even begin to scale, to be visible and vulnerable. Those were your words. First of all, we need to be very clear about the emotional terrain, because if we're not clear, we're not letting the emotions guide us, a lot can fall apart. And what I'm really hearing from you is that it is so important to honor all the feelings. I feel that a lot of times that when women think about going wild, they feel fearful and afraid because it's almost like to be unleashing this torrent of emotions that has been suppressed and dammed up for so long that it can be frightening, because there are oceanic depths that we don't even know in our conscious minds, right? And so letting it all well up can be quite frightening. And yet, so when I think about this ocean and river woman, I think about a lot of shadow work that needs to be done, plunging and diving deep into the depths and surrendering, just sometimes letting the tide comes and letting it pull us. Earlier on, you were talking about how we are a part of nature and how we are a part of the moon, the cycles and all of that, getting pulled by the tides. I know that I do a lot of work around that because I was born on a full moon, and I feel I get very much like the moon cycles affect me quite a lot. And in the past, I would try to cling on to my rational logic for something that was completely irrational. I was trying to swim against the tide until I said, okay, I'm just going to let myself drown. And I was literally like, it felt like I was drowning in my tears. The tears just kept coming and they wouldn't stop. And I just had to keep, and, earlier on we were pre-recording, we were talking about Finhorn. It was at Finhorn that I just cried every single day. Like every day. And there was this holding in the space and the energy where I felt safe to cry and bawl in front of complete strangers. And I thought, oh wow, it was so necessary. And I remember at the very end of my time at Finhorn, I wrote a little poem that I saw as a prayer and a spell and a blessing all rolled into one. And I think one of the lines was, like, may the tears that we have shed water the seeds that are to grow. And that got me thinking about the idea of the grassland, how the cultivation takes work. Because when we return, like when I left the retreat, it was like, okay, I was back in the matrix, so to speak, where tears were seen as too much. It was, it wasn't allowed, so like there was no longer that safe sanctuary to feel into my emotions. But because I had that space, and it was actually the call that I felt at Finhorn to be doing the work that I'm doing now. So talk about, moving from the river and ocean to the mountain. Like I feel that that's where I'm at right now. And again, finding my way through. So these beautiful metaphors, and also just to add, Mary, as you were sharing all of that, I couldn't help but look at the beautiful painting you have behind you. I wonder if there's a story to it, because from where I'm seeing it, I can see it's a female figure sitting on a bench. There's a tree in front of her, but because of the lines and the curves, it almost feels as if her neck and her head are merging into the tree, and the tree is like her hair, like there's that vastness of her. And then you have that plant, right? So there's that 3D element as well. It just organically came alive for me as you were talking about all these earth archetypes. So so just out of curiosity, I wonder if there's a story there.
So I'm going to hold that thought about that, because there is kind of a story, actually. There's always a story, right? There's always a story. But I want to go back to what you were saying about emotions. Can I do that, Irene? You're good with that. Good. Because I think as women, this is, to me, it's always magical that really ocean and river woman and lake woman and all the waters of the world woman lies in the middle of the journey. She's the third of the fifth 5 archetypes, because it is so central. And the truth is, you are so right that if you've suppressed your emotions for so long and you haven't learned the art of dancing with them and being with them and barely recognize them, I mean, we can have torrents of emotion coming through us, and actually we don't even recognize what those feelings are. We can mistake rage for woundedness. We can mistake woundedness for rage. I mean, in other words, we're just infused and filled with all kinds of feelings that we haven't become literate in yet. We don't have the language. So part of the skill of Ocean and River Woman is becoming intimate with your feelings. And just as water is a shapeshifter, moving from ice to snow to salty to, non-salty, looking for the word. And, so our emotions are shape-shifting. And the word emotion is to talk about motion, to be in motion. And where we often get into trouble is we try to hold on. We can feed our anger and resentment. We can, I have to be happy all the time. Joy, joy, joy. It can go all over the place. So there's this sense of you're working with something which is incredibly dynamic. As you said, it comes from the depths of your oceanic self. It moves, it changes, and sometimes it bursts out and it floods. And people downstream get hurt and things are swept away. Relationships, all kinds of things. But the truth is that a wild river will flood. It does. And when the flood recedes, in the main, if it has been a natural event, you will have a fertile plain. So yes, it is easier to deal with your emotions on a more smaller, getting to know them, allowing them to be held. You talked about Fintorn and that security. The river needs a riverbed. It needs some sense of being held, and our feelings do too. So encouraging this journey to be done with other women, with people who you feel deeply safe with, who can say, yes, it's okay. Throw a rage party, beat pillows, do, a joy party, experience it all, give permission to it all, and know also that you need to be responsible for your feelings, that they're not here to be, because that's sometimes how we manipulate as women. We're very good at that because we haven't had overt power. It's one of the covert power things we've done. So thank you for bringing up emotion again, because I think it is just so central to really unleashing our power as women. It's just really so becoming, as I say, really exploring. And I'm really excited about the book that's coming out through Fintorn because it has so many experiential things to help you explore how you feel. This is so she's actually an older woman, and that little white line across her back is her bra strap. So I love it because she's got the zip doesn't quite go up anymore. She's taking literally up more space as she gets older. And she's just sitting there by this incredibly feminine, beautiful tree. But I got this when I was in the worst relationship of my life. And it's the only thing that it was one of those relationships where I had to bottom out on all of the patterns within myself that were holding me back, keeping me small, shaming me, stopping me from being myself. It was one of those relationships where you do hold up the mirror. And if you get that moment of actually seeing what's happening to you in the process of what you're doing, how you're bending over to be acceptable, you go, oh, I do not like what I see. And out of that came somebody who feels so natural in her own body. She doesn't care her bra strap's showing. She doesn't care that her dress doesn't quite fit the way it used to fit. She's just there gazing back to us because her focus is on something. She's not being looked at. She's not being objectified. She's just literally merging, as you said, with this beautiful natural being. So there is always a story.
Yeah. I'm glad I asked that question because it flows so nicely. Isn't that the state that we all ultimately want to get to, where we are no longer concerned about putting on masks, that who cares if there are people behind our backs talking about us and pointing fingers and saying, oh, what's wrong? And it's like, who cares? Like your gaze and your focus is on something much bigger, much bolder, much more beautiful, that all the little voices just drop away. I love that. Yeah, so I'm just taking a moment to pause and feel into everything that you have said. So much richness there, this elemental surrender, I feel, to like who we ultimately truly are at our core, and I'm wondering, I think this would be a really lovely time to drop in and do some writing, to drop inwards, to cultivate that inward looking. And so let me invite you to take us through a practice that you often take your students through. So please take the space.
Okay, very happy to do that. So I would invite you, Irene, and everyone listening to just take a few deep breaths. And as you breathe out, really just let go of anything any distractions, any thoughts that are cluttering your mind, and just really come present to this moment, this place, this community. And you have just taken a journey through these earth archetypes. You have encountered the empty spaces of Desert Woman, where you literally come to know yourself in the bones of your being, where you understand at the very deepest level, you are enough. Just as you are enough. And you have entered the dark womb of Forest Woman, where there is no one path, where every path spirals and leads to other things, where you feel the deep rootedness of your being, where you dream dreams that perhaps you have never dared to dream before, and they live in your belly, seated there. And you move to the breaking waters of ocean and river, woman, and you feel the pulse of your passions moving through you. How energetically you are drawn to what brings you alive. How you know in your deepest being what you need to give to this world and be in this world. What your heart is telling you. And from there, the mountain woman rises, ample-bodied, tall, granite strong. And you sense your willingness to live in this world from the truth of your own soul, to build your actions, to take action, to express based on your values, what you care about, who you are. And you will be seen, and you will be heard. But your voice is strong. And you return now to the lands of grassland woman to nurture this new-born life. And you sense the challenge, but also the invitation. And you carry within you all of these ancient earth archetypes, your ancestors, midwives to your wild soul. And you bring your gifts and you seed those dreams. And you know in your heart that when the time is right, your medicine will bloom. So here now, reflecting on desert woman and forest woman and ocean and river woman and mountain woman and grassland woman. Just allow one to speak through you now. Perhaps you feel an energy of being called to it, or even an energy of danger or excitement, and just allow one of them to come to you now and feel that archetype within you, where it lives in you, where it breathes in you. And pick up a pen and a pencil or a pencil and your journal. And even if you don't have one, you can just do this in your mind's eye. So don't worry, you don't have paper and pen. And begin with these words: the archetype in me knows. So it could be the forest woman in me knows. And you're just going to write for 3 minutes, whichever one it is, for 3 minutes. The archetype in me knows. What do they know? And just another minute. And find your stopping place. Yes. So, Irene, would you be willing to share with everyone what you wrote?
Mm.
You can say no if you,
Oh
but
no, I would be
no.
happy to, because this has been
Okay.
such a real blessing to be
Mm.
gifted with your words and that beautiful meditation that you guided us through. And first of all, well, let me just share that as you guided us with an activation, to feel into the very depths of our being, I couldn't help it. I cried again.
I
The
saw.
tears just came, it's like, yeah. And I also kept getting an image, and also viscerally, I was feeling a lot of heat rise and well up in me. And I think that informed the writing that I did. So it's very interesting that today you introduced us to 5 powerful archetypes. And I think I came up with a blend of the two. So, if you can afford me some creative license, that
Yes, all wild soul women are entitled to creative licenses.
so this is just a short piece, 3 minutes, what I came up with. The volcano archetype in me knows that she's both ocean and mountain. In the form of fiery magma, deep in Earth's core, she rises with a fierce knowing that she's not meant to stay underground. As tectonic plates shift and move, she rises up into the crust and pushes through, knowing that she has arrived.
And I just see that beautiful smile on your face. She has arrived. Yes. And I loved how you spoke. You really spoke to that, like something from our oceanic depths really does get pushed up in mountains, doesn't it? That sense of when we go to the mountain, we often find all the shells and the underwater aspects of the earth, and that relationship between our watery selves and our mountain selves, that deep upwelling that occurs. So what is inside of us, that is in our very depths, is now surged into the mountain. That was so beautiful. How do you feel having read that? And like when you read that, how did you feel afterwards?
Well, reading it out loud, it made me teary again. It was like I was giving voice to a sense of knowing, like that push up when I talk about rising, but there are obstacles there as well, But again, when I think about the volcano, when I think of Mother Pele, like the goddess, she is unstoppable, I think for so long, I have, like you, see myself as too much and try to cap it down. And I do have a lot of fire inside of me, which was deemed unacceptable in Asian cultures and also as a woman. So there is both the gender and then cultural, societal pieces around that. And yet, it's since we're talking about Earth and rewilding ourselves back in nature, I know that in a lot of the travels that I did are very much guided by these downloads that I get to visit a place and feel into the land energies. So one of the things that I did a couple of years ago was to visit Hawaii, specifically the Big Island where the volcanoes are still active. And I remember I just spent days just returning and returning again to the Volcano National Park and just feeling into there was something extraordinary knowing that the land I'm standing on was not so long ago right deep into in the core of Mother Earth, and that it wasn't quite ready to be soil yet. There was still something very raw and primal about it, but also something really grand and beautiful. And life was already starting to sprout out, and there was that reminder of that fertility that comes. It can sometimes come at a price in a sense that it can destroy. But just as you were talking about how, when a flood naturally happens, it leaves behind a fertile land. And I think that, in the world, right, with all the global crisis that we're in, we're losing sight that nature has the power to heal itself. We just have to get out of its way. We just have to have an honor and a reverence and a respect for its natural rhythms and cycles. So when I feel into this volcanic energy, it's like it's raw, it's primal, it's strong, and it's natural, and there's nothing to fear or hide or run away. Feeling into both the fire and the water in me, like these two elements are so, I feel that they're so fundamental at my core. So this practice of just, having you guide us so that we can go deep, and then a very quick 3 minutes where we don't think too much, we just write down what welled to the surface, is a very, very powerful practice to have. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Mary, you only just gave us a small taste of the beautiful offerings. I'm very glad that you are so much, because it also means that you have so much to offer and to give. And by not dimming your light, by fully taking up space in your radiant wildness, you are able to show us in all these archetypes that you have embraced and brought to life and manifested, right? You were saying earlier how we are really an expression, a human expression of nature, and when I think of taking up space, I think of coming alive to that, not walking around like zombies, dead to our emotions, and cut off. So what a beautiful conversation this has been, and I would love for our audience to get to know you more. And you have this beautiful, generous gift offering that you are gifting to all Summit. And this is a quiz, and who doesn't love a quiz, right? This quiz is called "What Wild Soul Woman Archetype Are You?" So this feels like a very natural progression from everything we've just talked about. This is a quiz that can help unlock who you truly are and discover your innate nature, as well as your talents, the gifts that you have to bring out to this world. So take this short quiz to discover what archetype you hold, and the link to that can be found right here on this Summit page. So Mary, any words to share about why you feel this quiz would benefit the women watching this enormously?
So what I'd like to say is that we carry all the archetypes. And that's what I loved when you were talking about the fire and the water. Yes, yes, yes. And in fact, archetypes, it's really important to acknowledge that you don't want to so overly identify with one archetype, because in a way, that's just another form of oppression. It's another form of being locked in a box. So the quiz is to find out and discover the archetype that is stirring in you most in this moment. If you were to take it again in 3 months, 6 months, a year, might be very different. But it's just really a way of recognizing perhaps which archetype you want to become most curious about and begin to play with, begin to engage with right now. And you'll receive some ideas about what it means to embody that archetype, both spiritually, emotionally, and also in terms of globally, in terms of how we want to show up in this world that is hurting so badly. In other words, I think as we rewild ourselves, we come to realize that our healing is not just our own. That for real healing and real wholeness, it means that we are making healing and contributing to the wholeness of some part of this world around us, whether it be working with our families or on climate change, or it doesn't matter. But what matters is that it's not just about us. Never is just about us, because we are part of this great web of life. So it helps you kind of see ways that you can contribute.
Beautiful. Mary, I took that quiz of yours years ago. After hearing your inspirational message, I'm going to go back and redo it.
Go do it.
So once again, Mary, thank you so much for your time, your energy, and the amazing work that you're doing out there in the world that is so sorely needed. Rewilding one woman at a time, so that we can all grow and expand into our fullness and take up the space that we are here, that we are meant to be here to take up.
Thank you so much, Irene. It's been a real joy.